Hello, my name's Michelle Herzog. I'm the History Social Science Consultant here at the Los Angeles County Office of Education and the Director of the California Democracy School Civic Learning Initiative.
My name is Ryan Stout. I work with Michelle as the California Democracy School Civic Learning Coach.
We want to welcome you to this Module 3 of this professional development series that's designed to provide educators with the knowledge, skills, and resources to implement high-quality civic learning in classrooms to prepare all students for college, career, and civic life in the 21st century. The entire series can be found at www.lacoe.edu/California Democracy School. Modules 1 and 2 focused on the urgent need for civic learning and provided an overview of the California Democracy School Initiative. We also described the 5 components of high-quality civic learning: inquiry, investigation, civil dialogue, communicate conclusions, and then taking informed action. In this module, we're going to take a deeper dive into the first component and provide you with information, tips, and resources to take that first step into framing a civic inquiry. We'll also show you what this looks like in the classroom by observing 2 different teachers facilitate the process with their students. Today's objective is for participants to be able to understand the process of framing inquiries that'll lead to rich, student-centered investigations. This will allow the learners to address problems that are relevant, authentic, and eventually lead them to taking informed action. During today's webcast, we'll begin by discussing the rationale for inquiry-based instruction and why it's crucial in the process of engaging students. We're going to examine Dimension 1 of the College, Career, and Civic Life Framework for Social Studies State Standards, also known as the C3 framework. Dimension 1 of this framework focuses on helping students develop compelling and supporting questions that guide their learning and eventually lead to informed action. We'll also look closely at the California Democracy School Initiative Civic Inquiry and Investigation Rubric. This tool provides teachers a clear understanding of how to assist students to develop effective inquiry questions. You'll also have the opportunity to observe what this looks like in a classroom as we peek in on Martha Chacon's students at Santa Monica High School and then Barbara Doughton's students at Cabrillo High School in Long Beach. Ryan, as you know, inquiry-driven instruction is really nothing new. It's an approach that's been used to engage students for a long time. Now, when you worked in the classroom and as a teacher and now as a coach, how have you seen inquiry to be such a powerful piece for teaching?
From my experience, inquiry really shifts the ownership of learning to the student. When students have the opportunity to create their own meaningful and relevant inquiry questions, you can really sense a newfound excitement for learning.
You probably have some thoughts on the use of inquiry. Take a moment to look at these ideas about questioning and inquiry. Why is it so important for students to ask authentic, relevant, thought-provoking questions? Take a look at these quotes. Do any of them shed new light on the importance of inquiry-based learning? Take some time with your colleagues to respond to some of these questions. The College, Career, and Civic Life Framework for the Social Studies State Standards, published in 2013 by National Council for the Social Studies, has framed the teaching of social studies to be inquiry-driven. And we've drawn a great deal from the C3 framework to frame our civic inquiry and investigative practices in this initiative. The 4 dimensions of the C3 framework include Dimension 1, developing questions and planning inquiries. Dimension 2, applying disciplinary tools and concepts. This is the content of civics, economics, geography, and history. Dimension 3 is about evaluating sources and then using its evidence. For Dimension 4, where students communicate conclusions and then take informed action. Let's take a moment to look at Dimension 1 of the C3 framework that calls for students, with the aid of their teachers, to construct compelling questions, construct supporting questions, and determine helpful sources. So you might ask, what is a compelling question? First of all, a compelling question has to be intellectually rigorous. This means that there's a clear connection to content, and it requires students to look at multiple perspectives to answer the question. Secondly, a compelling question is relevant to kids' lives and is kid-friendly. Students should be able to clearly understand the question without much scaffolding, and they should find it initially quite engaging. For example, why do we need rules? Is a great example of a compelling question that can be used at many different grade levels. Also, compelling questions should be neutral and unbiased. They shouldn't lead students to a particular answer or persuasion, but leave some room for multiple interpretations. Compelling questions should also be open-ended in order to prompt students to seek to understand different points of view, reach a conclusion based on evidence collected, evaluated, and analyzed, much like we see in the Common Core. Finally, we want this process to lead to students' ability to take informed action. Ryan, explain for us, what do we mean by developing supporting questions?
While compelling questions focus on enduring questions and concerns, supporting questions focus on descriptions, definitions, and processes on which there is general agreement within the social studies discipline. One of the chief purposes of a supporting question is to provide context for a compelling question. Let's revisit the question, why do we need rules? A student may take such a question in a number of directions, but for curricular purposes, it makes sense to define some parameters that give shape to the inquiry. Supporting questions help define those curricular parameters. Examples of supporting questions might include, what are some rules that families follow? What are some school rules? What classroom rules have you followed in the past? These questions can be easily developed by teachers or students in a social studies lesson and really help to scaffold investigations.
I think you're right. Framing strong inquiries is really at the center of this work and the Democracy School Initiative. We utilize the principles of Dimension 1 to identify elements of high-quality inquiry for the purpose of building civic inquiry. And we created the Civic Inquiry Investigation rubric to help educators develop civic learning units that include all 5 instructional components of high-quality civic learning. I want you now to take a moment, download the rubric, and look it over before we move forward. So, as you scan the rubric, notice that we've divided our expectations into 3 parts: inadequate, adequate, and exemplary. Our focus, of course, is for this webcast to frame a high-quality civic learning inquiry. You can find this on page 1 of the rubric. There's 5 expectations for an exemplary inquiry question. Number 1, the question should be clear, specific, authentic, and manageable. It's crucial that students clearly understand what the question is asking, that it can connect that to eventual steps for investigation. Secondly, the inquiry must address a problem that is authentic and relevant to students. You'll see that in the rubric. Eventually, students will need to take informed action based on this question. So it's really important that they're addressing an issue that's important to their lives. Thirdly, an exemplary practice is for students to be actively engaged in the developmental stage of the inquiry question. This is a pretty challenging step for many educators, but ultimately it pays off as students are more engaged when they can take ownership of their own learning, as we know. Fourthly, it's important that the inquiry question allows for the development of creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking skills. And finally, a strong inquiry question will develop the cognitive and participatory skills of students to result in their ability to take action in the form of policy or even direct service. At the beginning of the project, the instructor should have a clear vision of what actions the students may take at the conclusion. Take a moment now with your colleagues to discuss these questions. How do civic inquiries align to the C3 framework for social studies state standards? How do they align to the Common Core state standards? And how is this approach perhaps different from what you've seen in a traditional classroom? Now that we've given you a brief overview of what we mean by a civic inquiry, we want to take some time to show you what it looks like in the classroom. One of the very first questions asked by teachers is, how should the civic inquiry be created? Should it be formulated by teacher, by the students, or both? And that's kind of a hard question for us to answer because obviously it depends on a number of factors. Certainly we want students to have a voice in creating the inquiry since it should definitely be focused on a topic that's relative and interesting to them. But we also know that teachers have an obligation to deliver content knowledge and skills in the course they teach. The best examples we've seen is when teachers guide students to think about inquiries within the context of the course content they're required to teach. That's their responsibility. Of course, younger students will need more guidance than older ones. Knowing the capabilities of your students is really important. So let's see this one. It's Martha Chacon as she begins her civic inquiry and investigation in her 9th grade freshman seminar class at Santa Monica High School in the Santa Monica Malibu School District. Now, before we do, though, take a moment to download the lesson plan to help you follow along. Ryan, guide us through this piece. Give us a snapshot of what we're going to see in the video piece.
Sure. At Santa Monica High School, all 9th grade students are required to enroll in a freshman one-semester seminar course. This is where the school has institutionalized civic learning, so every student will participate in this experience. Leading up to this civic inquiry and investigation, Martha engaged her students in a study of the American eugenics movement. Most associate the eugenics movement with Nazi Germany, but it was also practiced in the United States prior to World War II as a method of preserving and improving the dominant groups in the population. In this example, you'll see Martha guide her students through the following steps. 1. Students identify topics they would like to investigate based on their study of the societal implications of the American eugenics movement. Step 2, students brainstorm a number of questions regarding their topic. 3, students distinguish compelling from supporting questions. 4, students select one compelling question to serve as their civic inquiry. 5, students analyze and identify supporting questions. And lastly, 6, students chart and present their topic, compelling, and supporting questions. As you watch the video, pay careful attention to the process and role of the teacher, as well as the role of the students.
We're going to go ahead and get started. Remember that we've been studying the American eugenics movement, and we have been really looking at the societal implications of the American eugenics movement. So right now at your tables, I want you guys to discuss a topic that you would be interested in further investigating. Remember that it has to lead to civic action. So go ahead and take a few minutes and have that conversation.
I guess this is going to be a collective thing, so this definitely is not going to be our final option, but something that's really important to me is music, and I feel that there are school districts that are not as fortunate as ours to have a music program, and that has really influenced my life, so I think that it should influence others as well. So I think the music program is a really big part of this, and I think that we should be able to.
Yeah, I think we should make it all about like fine arts, not just music, because there are like other things that have to do with fine arts that we could also discuss.
Yeah, that's true. It's not all about just one particular music program. It can be about everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like education in general. SMUSD is really good, and I'm very fortunate to be here, but I feel like there's other places that are not as good, and we could definitely branch out and learn more about that.
Yeah.
What could be like, what's a good topic we could choose?
I don't know, like what do you guys care deeply about? Like women's rights, I think that's important.
Yeah, because we have like three of these girls play sports, so.
Yeah,
I
so
was
maybe
thinking
like,
of education.
okay, education.
too.
Like education, like women's rights, like that kind of education.
Or we could also do it in like sports, so like women's
What do you
inequality
mean?
in sports.
Like explain like what that means.
Like so we could do it so there's like how not a lot of girls play football or wrestling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more like more guys sports to get girls to play more
Yeah.
the guys sports.
And like girls are just as good as guys, like
Yeah,
when it
yeah.
comes to sports.
And professionally, when they play those sports, they won't get the same amount of pay as the men's sports team.
Yeah, that's true.
When it comes to education as well, they don't get as many opportunities because everybody wants a man to be the CEO or
Yeah.
such
So
and
those
such.
are both like really
That's
big
true.
issues.
Yeah, those are good ones to address.
So do you want to should we do it in sports or in education?
I think we should do both.
But how could
Can we do both? Like those
Yeah,
are two
I think
big
it's two
topics.
different topics. Like
Yeah.
they're too big of a variety. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
I would say sports.
I'd rather do sports.
Yeah, that's more interesting.
And we have examples.
Okay, so you guys want to do women's rights in sports?
Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds
So the presenter from each table is going to stand up and present your topic. So table number 1.
Our topic is racial inequality, and we're doing about the certain implications that are given towards like different races such as blacks and the different types of stereotypes that are there and what can be implied and kind of assumed about some different people or races that aren't necessarily true.
Our topic is how can we change the perception of girls in schools? Like a lot of girls are very sexualized.
We're doing stereotyping relationships on how if it's supposed to be man and woman instead of man and man or woman and woman, or if it's like allowed and if it's not.
We're doing a project on the lack of fine arts in the education systems in different school districts and why they're seen as extracurricular rather than curricular.
So our topic is police brutality, and we're going to be talking about what can be done to prevent things that have happened recently and what we can do to help the topic.
Our topic is women's rights in sports and like keeping it equal with the men, because a lot of the time like women are playing like special like one sport where they should be playing a variety of sports.
We're doing disabilities and inequity, for example, in the workplace.
Our group is focusing on microaggressions.
It's always interesting to me to see the kind of topics that young people come up with. They always come out to be relevant, complex, and really controversial sometimes.
Yeah, these are issues that are both academic and relevant to students' lives.
Yeah, I think you're right. I like the way the teacher framed the discussion around the curriculum that she just covered, because she's responsible for that, and that's an important piece to remember. It's not a free-for-all. She's got to guide them to topics that relate to the content previously delivered about the American eugenics movement. For a history teacher, it might be around a historic event. For a science teacher, it could be around an environmental science unit, but it's framed around their content, so they're also meeting their goals and expectations in their work. From here, you'll see a teacher spark inquiry and invite students to ask questions about the topics they selected. First, you'll see them brainstorm and then analyze their questions to come up with one that is compelling. Let's watch.
All team members will write as many questions as they can about their topic to try to find out information about their topic on the Post-it notes that are on their tables. At this point, it doesn't really matter whether they're compelling or supporting, but write as many questions as you can and only one question per Post-it.
As a compelling or supporting question.
I think an option for a compelling question could be just the general idea, like why are the fine arts not seen as curricular?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea.
What about you, Tegan?
I was gonna write that why is fine arts not included in most school districts as curricular?
We could say about like how they're not well funded.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, that could be a supporting question.
Yeah.
As to why.
Like, what can we do to help other schools have enough money to support their
Other
programs?
grants that can be given.
Yeah.
Write questions just about like the general idea. Maybe some could be specific, but questions about how we can make it equal.
Okay, so what do you guys think about like what can we do to get girls into more like manly sports?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was thinking like, what sports do girls not play that guys do play?
Yeah, that's good because then we can make a list about yeah.
I was thinking more as to why are women's professional sport teams paid less than men?
Oh, that's a really good one. Yeah.
I was wondering why girls feel like they can't play sports with guys.
Yeah, like why they're like separated.
Yeah.
How can the community, like, how can we reach out to the community to get it noticed?
Like, what can we do to like show, like, or like spread the word about this, like action, you know, like yeah.
So now that you have written your questions, I'm going to review with you supporting and compelling questions. Compelling questions are really intellectually meaty. They're something that you want to look at. They're really student friendly. They apply to your lives. They're really provocative and engaging, and they're really worth spending some time on. But the most important thing about a compelling question is that it's somehow going to lead to some sort of informed action. So Your supporting questions, however, are kind of like the foundation. They help you build. They contribute knowledge and insights. They give you some descriptions. They help scaffold your investigations. So I'm going to give you some examples of compelling and some examples of supporting questions. So one good example would be, what can we do to ensure that our government ethically manages the lottery? So it has that informed action piece in there. What can we do to help our parents' generation be more accepting of the LGBTQ community? Right? Something very history-related, was the civil rights movement of the 1960s a success? And has a definition of America changed over time? So those are some really good, compelling questions that are really meaty, they're kind of deep, they're provocative, and they definitely lead to informed action. Now, the supporting questions would be kind of like a level 1 question, right? When was the lottery first enacted in California? Kind of like this basic information you need to know. What are the attitudes of different generations towards the LGBTQ community? What are some important figures in the civil rights movement and what was their role? And how have immigration patterns changed in the last 150 years? Okay. So what you're going to be doing right now is that you're going to be analyzing your questions and sorting them into compelling and supporting questions, keeping in mind that some questions are going to be supporting. You might not have one really strong compelling question, so you may have to modify a supporting question to become your compelling question, or you might have to create an original one.
All right, so let's see these questions.
All right.
Just put all your questions in the middle, so just read and decide. We'll go left to right.
Okay.
Okay, so what can we do to help support music programs in other districts? Well, I think maybe not music. I guess that's a big branch of the fine arts.
Yep. Yeah.
It's just that I think that would be a supporting question of a supporting question.
Yeah, I think that's a little too like specific. We could make it more general.
Yeah. So that can actually still be used though. So
Later we can adjust it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I like the way it sounds. It's
Yeah,
just,
like-
I think that music is a little too specific.
Yeah.
That could
Just
be
like
compelling.
painting.
Mm-hmm.
Why are certain fine arts programs not funded very much? I think that's pretty good. I think that the point of, money and budget, I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
So we don't actually need this one because I wrote, is budget the issue? And that's the same thing. So what are the benefits to having the fine arts in a school district? What do you guys
I think that's
That's a good
supporting, but it's helpful.
Yeah.
Because that can help us lead to the answer to our.
Yeah, I saw this one, I think it was a documentary on this one person who said that music and painting and all this like poetry and free writing like that, it actually really helps with your
Yeah.
schoolwork as well.
Yeah, that's cool.
Why are the fine arts not seen as curricular? Like, what is the reason behind it?
Yeah, I think it's supporting.
How is the fine arts good? That's the same thing as this one.
Yeah.
So we might, same thing. Why are the fine arts? Oh, that's the same thing as this one. So yeah, I think now we have to decide which one is the compelling question.
Okay. So
We could say,
I think maybe we could combine two questions.
yeah, that's
Because
smart.
there's some good, pretty good questions that are a little too specific that we
could
can
take
make more
we
general.
could take these four that we decided as supporting, and we can see what these branch to. So we could say
That's
we could say fine arts, or should, the compelling question could be, should the fine arts be considered as curricular?
I feel like this question's a little bit vague. Is there any way where we could kind of expand it?
Yeah, I think that, why do schools not value the fine arts? I don't think there's much we can do civically with that.
Yeah, so we need to make it more leading to informative action. So I think it should be more about
Well, let's think.
what can
'cause
they do to change this, or what can they do?
What can they do to support it?
Yeah.
Because, we can go off and we can say, why the fine arts are great, trust me, they're amazing, but what can we do to show that they should, encourage it and make it better? So I think we could say,
How can we get schools to encourage the fine arts?
yeah, how can we get schools to support the fine arts? Because encourage, that's probably
Yeah.
yeah.
This is a good, compelling question. Do you guys think that this? Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
I think it's better.
Yeah,
We
it's
could
better.
definitely do something off of this.
Yeah,
We expanded off this a lot more.
You can do something
Wait,
informative
but I
action.
think we should see, does this still apply?
Okay, so now you guys, now that you've sorted them into supporting and compelling questions, you're going to choose the one compelling question that is going to serve as your civic inquiry. This is what's going to drive your entire project. Okay? So you have to pick one.
How have we become callous to everyday racism and racial inequality?
Our compelling question is, how can we change the way girls are perceived in schools?
Our question is, how can we help people in society be more accepting of different relationships?
Our compelling question is, how can we get schools to support the fine arts?
Our civic inquiry question is, what actions can be taken to bring awareness to law enforcement who abuse their authority in low-income communities?
Our compelling question is, what are ways we can help out if address the problem of girls' inequality when it comes to sports?
Why are people with disabilities treated differently in the workplace, and what can we do to change that?
Our compelling question is, how can we raise awareness about microaggressions and how do they affect those targeted?
So what we've just seen is some real high-level critical thinking. How do you contemplate a number of questions about a topic and then develop one that is compelling? A question that's intellectually meaty and requires deep learning, that's relevant and interesting and lead to informed action. Some of the compelling questions we heard were more leading than others. Ideally, you'd want them to be more open-ended or neutral sounding, but you know, if they're compelling to students, they're worth thinking about or using, particularly if you think it will prompt a deep study of multiple perspectives and lead to some informed action based on the evidence they collect. Now from here, we're going to see Martha guide the students to create supporting questions to help guide their investigation.
At this point, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be analyzing our supporting questions because you wrote a lot of supporting questions and some of them may not be linked to your compelling question. So you're going to see which questions are linked to your compelling question, what can we modify, and then do we need to create more supporting questions. So go ahead and add supporting questions because eventually you're going to be putting it on your chart. And we want your compelling and your supporting questions.
We have 4 here, and these 4 we've already gone through, and we've decided these are pretty good, but we can add more.
Yeah.
So, do you guys have any ideas? Let's think. Wait, where's the compelling question? There it is. No.
Not that one. I heard that.
So we have the compelling question right here. How can we get schools to support the fine arts? And let's see. Okay, so we have why they're not seen as curricular, so we have the reasoning behind that. We have the benefits to why they should be seen as curricular. We have what we can do to help.
I think what we can do to help is kind of like the same thing as this because this is like also informative action. So I think if we have that, we don't need to have that also.
That's true.
And we still also need to expand off of just music.
Yeah, because it's too specific anyways.
Yeah, okay. So why are certain fine arts programs not funded very well?
Right.
Or we could say, why are certain fine arts programs not selectively funded? Why are they thought of as the aftermath? Like, you funded everything else, let's decide. Maybe we'll do a little bit of a music program. Maybe we'll do a little bit of an art program.
So it needs to become more of a priority.
Yeah.
I think we may have a little too many supporting questions. So what are some that are maybe better than others?
Well, let's combine these two definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these are like the same question.
Do you want to just like write that on a post-it? Yeah. Like write them together.
Write the whole question. So it would be what makes a sport manly and what makes a sport.
Yeah. Okay. Let's make sure they all like correspond to the compelling question also.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can just read them.
All right. So what do you guys like know any ones we could eliminate? So how many do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I think it's okay if we have 8.
It's a good number.
As long as they all go towards our compelling.
All right, so let's make sure they go towards our question.
Okay.
So why are women professional sports teams paid less than men professional sports teams?
Okay, yeah.
That works, yeah.
Yeah, because it's like about sports and
Inequality.
Yeah, inequality.
Yeah, okay.
What are some sports that girls are obligated to play? That works.
Also, yeah, that's like data, like figuring out stuff. How can we tell our community about this topic?
I don't think
That's
so.
kind of in the middle.
That's
of
kind of
compelling
like,
and
yeah, that's kind of
supporting.
like the question in a way.
Okay.
It's like, yeah, it's like in the middle of
Should
supporting.
we get rid of it?
We should take that one out.
Yeah, take that one out. Okay. Why do girls feel limited in choices when it comes to sports? Is that good?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Because it'll be like an opinion.
Yeah. Why don't girls feel like they can play sports? That's good.
Yeah.
Keep going, are you going?
Oh, this was just like the what makes the sport manly, what makes it girly. So that's that one works.
That works.
Yeah.
What sports are not played as much by girls? That's also more data.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and it can help us see like, oh, what are the statistics of sports played by girls?
But these are kind of like the similar questions. Like, it's kind of similar. Like, why do girls feel limited in choices when it comes to sports, and what sports are not played as much by girls?
Yeah.
So I feel like we can make that one question.
Okay. So let's just word this one because they're sort of
This
like
one?
the same.
What is that? What are girls?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So we'll take this one out.
And then the last one.
Do the same amount of girls play sports as boys?
You can see here that students are really getting into the weeds when developing their supporting questions. I noticed a great deal of critical thinking demonstrated by the students. I heard them comment on what made a good question, one that was relevant to their topic and would lead to further inquiry. And the ability to distinguish a compelling question from a supporting question required a great deal of deep thought and analysis. I could also see them combining questions, discarding questions, and focusing on ones they felt were most important.
And you can see the interest level and engagement. These students really want to learn about their topic. They're engaged, thinking critically, listening carefully, and engaging in a meaningful dialogue to complete their task successfully. Let's see what some other groups come up with.
So our topic was microaggression, and our inquiry question was, how can we raise awareness about microaggressions and how they affect those targeted? And our supporting questions are, what are microaggressions? Are people aware of microaggressions? What are examples of gender-associated microaggressions? Do microaggressions limit opportunities for both genders? How do microaggressions affect people's feelings? And how can we raise awareness with the help of society?
So our topic was the fine arts, and our compelling question was, how can we get the schools to support the fine arts? Our supporting questions were, why are the fine arts not seen as curricular? What support is necessary? What are the barriers to parent involvement? What are the benefits in having the fine arts program in a school? What are the barriers to making the fine arts available to all students in all schools? What funding would be needed?
Our topic was women's rights, and our compelling question was, what are ways we can help address the problem of girls' inequality when it comes to sports? Our supporting questions were, what makes a sport manly and what makes a sport girly? What are some sports that girls are obligated to play? What sport is the most popular among girls? Why do girls feel limited in choices when it comes to sports? Why don't girls feel like they can play sports? Do the same amount of girls play sports as boys? And the last one is, why are women professional sports teams paid less than men professional sports teams? Thank you.
The students in this class really came up with some really compelling issues and inquiries to drive their investigations. And you can see how passionate they are in the topics they chose. You know, Martha really made it look easy, and yet you know she put a great deal of planning into the process of this.
We would like to give you, the viewer, some time to reflect upon what you just saw. Take a moment to think about the role of the teacher and the role of the students. What was the value of facilitating the process in this way? What I like about the way Martha orchestrated this activity was the intentionality of giving as much ownership of the process over to her students. You could tell that she was inviting and honoring student voice in the topics they chose and the questions they asked.
Let's take a moment now to evaluate the civic inquiry process. And we have two different tools you can use to evaluate them. You have the civic learning and investigation rubric, and you also have the classroom observation form. They both have the same information, but they're just in two different formats. Take a moment to download both of them and familiarize yourself with them. Then take some time to evaluate the civic inquiry process you just observed based on this criteria. To review again, was the inquiry process framed to be clear, specific, authentic, and manageable? Did the process address a problem that's authentic and relevant to students? Did it actively engage students in the development stage? Did it develop creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking skills? Did it develop the cognitive and participatory skills of students to result in students taking informed action, perhaps in the form of a policy or even direct service? Pause the tape to debrief what you saw with your colleagues. Now we're going to take some time to observe another teacher work with students to frame a civic inquiry, but through a slightly different format. This is Barbara Doughton. She's an outstanding social studies teacher at Cabrillo High School in the Long Beach Unified School District. Ryan, explain the approach that Barb takes to engage students in their civic inquiry.
In this example, the topic has already been selected by the entire class, and it is climate change. Students from different classes are all focusing on this topic, and they will conduct an investigation, engage in dialogue, and come up with conclusions at an upcoming town hall setting at the school. Barbara uses the 4 Worlds program to help students frame questions around social, political, cultural, and economic factors of climate change. Let's see how she directs students to conduct their task.
We're going to continue our conversation today in our quest of getting a question for our next town hall, which is on February 17th on climate change. And yesterday we talked a lot about what makes an issue controversial and what makes a question an important, compelling question, a question that's open-ended that we can spend the next 7 weeks on, right?
So we see Ms. Doughton introduce the lesson, remind students of the topic and their tasks for the day. She's going to define the expectation, spend some time talking about norms. This is an important element to guide students' dialogue in their groups. Let's watch.
So at the end of the day, or at the end of the period, you are going to be creating a poster based on the findings that you have come to based on the readings that I'm going to give you right now. And that poster is not only going to be an example of the readings that you did, but it's also going to include questions that we could possibly consider as we think about investigating climate change for our town hall. Okay? All right. I want to remind us that we have norms to follow. The norms are on the board right here. I want to go over them before we do. Eduardo, what is the first norm that we're going to adhere to today? Discuss and decide. Mr. Jarek, why is it important that we discuss and decide as we're trying to figure out what question we're going to have for our town hall?
Well, you may be able to learn new things that you haven't learned before.
Right. And Alexia, tell us why it's important that as we discuss and decide, we listen to one another.
So we're all on the same page.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. The other norm that we're going to be practicing today is Miss Anaya.
You have reasons for your suggestions.
Okay, so Miss Fatima, as a citizen of this classroom, of this school, of this community, of the world, why do you think it might be a good thing to give reasons for suggestions when we're trying to figure out solutions to problems?
Because without reasons, we don't actually know. Like, we have to understand it better, and without the reasons, we just don't know why.
Thank you very much. It's going to be so important today that you give reasons for your suggestions, because you're going to come to some conclusions about some very compelling questions surrounding climate change. Let's review. What makes something controversial? We spent the last 2.5 days on that. I'm going to give you a minute to talk at your table and come up with at least 3 of the 5 ways that we discuss what makes an issue controversial. Marlene, pick one thing on that list and summarize what your conversation was at the table regarding that one characteristic of controversy. What should we know about it?
Okay, confusion, and it could be threatening because like you might be confused and you might be forced to choose a side. And you know, it might be threatening to you because like it might affect you in a way that it might not affect someone else.
Okay, and we're going to be looking at a lot of issues today that are going to have what you're alluding to, different impacts on different people. And the questions that you're going to have to consider are, do we have to rank those? Who decides what impacts are less important, more important? One of you is going to have a topic looking at, should we just kind of go along with climate change and adapt to whatever is going to come to us, or should we try to stop it?
I was glad to see Barb take the time to talk about this issue of controversy. As we know, young people today are surrounded by stressful, complex issues and challenges in their lives. And addressing an issue that's controversial is important, but it needs to be carefully explained. And just like the previous example, time is committed for students to conduct some reading on the topic to give them a deep understanding of the issue and come up with compelling and supporting questions. In this example, we'll see Barb adapt the Four Worlds model from the Equity and Access Program of California International Studies Project to guide students' thinking when they develop questions to prompt their investigation. It asks students to consider the social, political, cultural, economic factors that influence various issues, and in this case, they are to consider these factors on the causes and consequences of climate change. Let's see what students come up with around the issue of mitigating or stopping climate change, or perhaps adapting to it.
For a political world, maybe how could we make people like start using like renewable energy?
So what would that question sound like?
Like how could we possibly make a law for people to use renewable energy?
Okay, and where are you going to write that? Thank you. How about you, Sophia?
For social worlds, we could plan how would mitigation would change our daily life.
And where would you put that? In that quadrant. Okay, and how about you? Can you contribute either economic or cultural?
I have a question for economic. Like, what would be the cost to enforce the law?
That's important, the cost, because people always worry about money. But think about other costs besides money that would enforce the law of having us use more renewable sources, okay? Have a conversation about that. I'll be back.
Could we possibly enforce the law?
Maybe like people, what are people's beliefs about how whatever adaptation and
Political world, economic world.
Hey, where's the
what?
Here it is.
So we could just say how would people feel about adaptation.
So we talked about mitigation versus adaptation. Mitigation is when like we're like trying to stop it, and adaptation is just we're gonna have to like learn to adapt to it. For political world, how could we possibly enforce a law? We could sign a petition, or we can do a peaceful protest. For economic world,
What would be the cost? Like, what would be the cost be? Money, manpower, taxes?
For social world, we plan how could it change our daily lives. It could affect our daily routines, possibly affect our transportations. And that's our posting.
Thank you very much. You gave us some really good questions to think about. Thank you.
So here we see a different approach to framing civic inquiries. I thought it was interesting to use that political, social, economic lens to frame questions. We see that emphasized in the C3 framework as well, so it was nice to see it here. The attention to looking at these different disciplines, civics, economics, history, geography, all important when we're looking at different issues that are complex and even controversial. Ryan, what did you think of this approach?
One thing I noticed about both Martha's and Barbara's approach is that these are strategies that are not specific to any one discipline. They can be used in a variety of classes with the goal of creating authentic and relevant inquiry questions.
Now, we'd like to give you some time, the viewer, to reflect on both approaches that you saw. What did you see that was similar? What did you see that was different? So we've presented you with two different approaches for framing a high-quality civic inquiry. Take a moment to think about this. How can this strategy help students become engaged citizens? What are some challenges associated with this strategy? What are some modifications that need to be made to be effective with your students? As we mentioned, the framing of the civic inquiry is critical and only the first step in implementing a high-quality civic inquiry and investigation experience for students. The following modules will go in depth on these different components. I hope you find the time to engage with them too. And you can find them all at www.laco.edu/California Democracy School. So thank you, Ryan, for joining me today and being part of this module. I thought the conversation was good, and wasn't it great seeing those students and those teachers?
In fact, it was. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I also want to thank those wonderful teachers for giving their time and their students, Martha Chacon and Barbara Doughton. It was terrific. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in and dedicating your time and energy to providing all students with this rich experience.